Alright, so about to unsolder the ground here. Gone ahead and run a yellow 16 gauge wire, give myself plenty length. Hopefully that's enough. Ended up coming down through here, through this little grommet here. I thought about trying to cut into the sheath and pass it through the sheath. It's already engineered for 4 wires, so that's not going to work. It looks like there's plenty of space for a zip tie to go right back here, as far as that space back there goes. So I'll run the wire down beside it, through it. I started to put it underneath this clip, but that's engineered for 4 wires also, and I don't want to jam all the wires in there, and then risk breaking that clip, which wouldn't be a big deal. I guess I could zip tie it, but I always worry about zip ties overheating or freezing. That's a problem here in southern Colorado where it gets pretty cold. Zip ties freeze and then they become brittle. So I don't know if heat affects them or not, but anyway, I'm going to run it around the back of this, right behind the stator there, and then bring it up. It looks like they've crossed with these sheathed wires. They've crossed over these connecting wires between these coils already, so I don't feel bad about that. And then I'll unsolder this one right here. Where's my? We'll unsolder this one right here. Pull it out this side, solder it to this yellow wire, and then go ahead and bring it around to tighten it up. I suppose if this was stationary, it'd be easier. Last try, and then I'll just cut it. Okay, so a tip here. This is coated wire, even though it's wrapped in, or it's covered in epoxy or something. The wire itself is also coated, so that if you try to do an ohm test on the outside of the wire, it won't conduct, because the outside of the actual tiny wire there is coated. So you have to scrape that off. And I just used a little light razor knife just to scrape the coating off. And then you can test for continuity, and we'll just use the tone tester here. And so the yellow wire that exists on the bike comes in the backside here, comes up here. This doesn't look yellow, but this is actually the yellow wire right here. And so we'll put one end here, and we'll put the other end on this wire. Okay, now we have connectivity. Originally I only had connectivity on the very tip right there. I wanted more exposure when I put the wire, when I wrap this wire around it and then solder it. I wanted more exposure of this wire against these wires. Okay, so I just scraped it down about that far, and I can take this probe and run it along the wire. Hopefully that's showing up. You can see it disappears there where the coating's there, but where the coating's gone. Okay. So I think I have enough coating removed all around the upper end of the wire there, so that when I solder this end on, I should have good connectivity there. Plenty of surface area. Okay, so like I said, I stripped some of the sheathing or the coating off the ground wire from about there up. I got the smallest crimp connector I had. I'm not a fan of crimp connectors. I don't use them as a rule. I always solder my wires together and everything. And bikes, boats, cars, whatever, trailers. But I was having trouble soldering this cable to this wire. Cable's just several wires stranded together, right? And this is a wire right here. And so I couldn't seem to get it to wrap my wires. I wanted to wrap my wires so there was good contact between the copper and the copper down here, and I didn't have a room, and I couldn't see how to dig it out right here to to pull this wire back around here because of this plastic epoxy that's around here. I was worried I'd fracture it and then I'd end up stripping the whole thing off and having to rewind it, and I don't have this coated wire. So I took this crimp, as smallest one I had is like a 20 gauge or 22 gauge, crimped it onto this wire here, and then flipped this over and then soldered this end right here. I crimped it in several places along it, and then I spread this part of it because the 16 gauge didn't want to fit in this. Put this way down inside here. Hopefully the tips of these are touching, but if they're not, at least the solder will conduct it and the crimp connector will conduct. And then soldered this, I crimped it actually and then soldered it here, so some solder ran down here to hold these connections together. And then we'll run some shrink wrap over it to isolate it. We'll shrink wrap this all the way over, as far as I can there. Real gently, I'm going to use a flame on this and shrink that down. And then I'll go ahead and run my wire probably just over the top of this. This is already insulated well. Or maybe I'll go ahead and run it and cross over back here and run it around the back side. Okay, hopefully this will solve it. And my question then was connectivity between this wire that I just put in. Okay, here's the other end of it right here. And it goes down here behind, through this red stuff. Here it's yellow again, back through this red stuff, around these windings, around these windings, around these windings, around these windings, to this one right here. So I think these are all the lighting coil for the yellow wire. And if I'm not mistaken, this should show us connectivity. We'll just turn the tone meter on here and hold this one here. So now my wire's attached. Hopefully we have good connection. And we do. Good. So I'm happy with that. Very good. Okay, so this is shrink wrapped, insulated well. I'm going to go ahead and bring my wire over the top here. It's not going to bend real well there because of my crimp, so we'll go ahead and come over the top of both of these. I'll pull this out the back here. Okay, so I'm going to re-zip tie this part right here, and I'll probably go ahead and put a little tiny bit of tension on it. I don't want to break this, obviously, but I'm going to put a little tiny bit of tension on it just so this part right here doesn't raise up and hit the flywheel. Okay, I don't think it will. I think the distance there's going to be plenty. It's sticking down lower than that lug there, and these plastic lugs are sticking much higher than that, so we should be okay. But I'm still going to put a little bit of tension on it just when I zip tie it, just to hold it in place. Cool. And also, as some added insulation, I'm going to make sure the shrink wrap tube comes around this metal edge here. There shouldn't be any movement here, but just in case there's some vibration or something that can cause that aluminum edge there down inside here to chafe the wire right there, we'll just keep that sheath right around there. And I'll heat shrink it a little bit here. Not too worried about heat shrinking that inside there. I don't need to. It's just extra insulation. Okay, cool. Okay, when you're reassembling this backing plate to the case, you want to make sure that you leave these two bolts loose before you put this one in, because you want this one to go in nice and smooth and in alignment. And then we'll rotate the and jiggle it and wiggle it so that hopefully the everything seats nice and smoothly and easily inside there. Make sure none of our wires are in the way. That zip tie is right there. There's a big space behind my zip tie where the block of the zip tie sticks out. So that's not hitting anything, I know that. And so that feels like it's in correct time. So now we'll run these others down gently by hand. Now that this one's snug, and I can wiggle it around and there's no real play in it, we'll tighten these others down.